we're entering into a series now that I'm really looking forward to, and it's called Shift Happens. And from the time you're born to the time you die, shift happens. I mean, shift just takes place, whether you like it or not. There are some shifts that you can plan for. There's some shifts that you can prepare for, and there are some shifts that will just come to you. You just wake up one day and something happens that causes life to shift. And today our whole message, the whole concept is we're kind of setting the stage for the next 4 weeks. And the concept today is how important it is for us to embrace the shifts. Some shifts we welcome. We can't wait for life to shift. We can't wait for things to change. And then other things, we find ourselves in a season, we find ourselves desiring actually to be in a place where we were before. We don't like the season that we're in, and it's very hard many times to embrace the shift. Now, think about this. From the moment you're born, you come into the world, things change. Now, most people, when you think of birth, the person you feel sorry for, the person you have compassion for, is the woman who delivers the child. Okay. Now, I certainly don't mean to downplay mom's role. All right. Mom carries a baby for 9 months. I mean, that's unbelievable. That's an incredible sacrifice on her part. And then I've had a front row seat to 2 deliveries, and I know well enough to know I don't want any part of that. I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to feel anything like that personally. So let me just on the front end say, I know moms have it tough. But could you imagine being the baby, okay? We don't remember this because we were too young. But just for a month, I mean, think about this. For 9 months, you were in a hot tub. I mean, you were totally relaxed. You had this warm fluid around you. You were comforted. You had maybe the greatest invention that God ever invented, the umbilical cord. How awesome is the umbilical cord? Seriously, you have this thing hooked up to you. It is a constant source of food. You don't even have to ask. All you have to do is just get hungry, and the food comes to you. I mean, I want an umbilical cord right now. I mean, that's just incredible. So you go from umbilical cord and perfect comfort to all of a sudden you're being shoved down a canal you don't fit in, and then you just come into the world. When you come to the world, the cold air hits you, somebody slaps you, okay, and you are emotionally confused because half the room is laughing, the other half of the room is crying, and some guy with a mask has scissors, okay, and he's looking at you. Could you imagine? That's your entry into the world. And from that moment, your life begins to shift, all right? You begin to change. And if you've ever had a front row seat to an infant, whether it was your child or a niece or nephew or somebody, a friend's child, you see, it's quick change. They're constantly shifting. They're constantly growing. You don't see a kid for a week or 2 weeks when they're a few weeks or a few months old and they've changed. They look different. They're acting different. They're more attentive and alert. It's just there's change happening all the time. They're shifting. Then they start crawling. And then they start walking. And then eventually they have a huge shift in life. They go to school, okay? So you go from having mom's attention all day, or you're in a certain environment, to now you are put in a totally different environment in school where now you're learning things, your mind is developing, you are in a social environment that you hadn't been in, and there's shifts that happen all over the place. We know through adolescent psychology that when a kid hits about 12 or 13, his mind shifts, her mind shifts. They develop. They go from concrete thinking to abstract thinking. This is why 12 and 13, 14-year-olds are very, very argumentative, because they know how to reason and argue now. They can think abstract, so they're almost enamored with their own ability to argue. All right, that's why 14-year-olds are so much fun to hang around, because they'll just argue every little thing. But they can think differently. As you're older, when you read Dr. Seuss, have you ever read Dr. Seuss as an adult and you get stuff you didn't get as a kid? Right? When you were a kid, you just thought he was talking about green eggs and ham. You know, as an adult, you read it, you're like, oh, he's making a point there. Oh, I get the point, because you're thinking abstract instead of concrete. Some of you watched the Lorax when it came out, and you realized Dr. Seuss was a tree hugger. You didn't realize it when you read it at first, and now the abstract concepts start to enter your brain, and you begin to think that way, so shift happens again. Your mind is different. How many of you know puberty hits, shift happens, right? You start getting hair places you didn't have. Things start popping out places you didn't have. All right, things are different. Okay, your body is ever changing. Acne comes up on your face. Your face starts looking different. Your hair changes. Just all these changes. Shift happens like crazy. Then you graduate. You graduate. By the time you got high school figured out and the social scene and how to exist in that weird place called school, then you go off to college. And depending on what your college experience is, it's a huge shift. Some of you had to move away. You move away to college and you live with somebody now in the same room, and you have a roommate, and the professors teach differently and life is different. And then you graduate college and now it's a whole new shift. We're talking no more fraternity. We're talking no more dorm. Now you've got to grow up and act like a grown up. You step into a career. Now you've got a new pattern. There's no more staying up till 2 a.m. hanging out with your boys or your girls. Now all of a sudden I got to get serious about this career. Then you meet somebody, you get married. Lord help us. How many of you know there's a shift? Gigantic shift. It goes from just your time to our time. You share a house with somebody, and even little things cause a shift. How many of you know there are things that happen when you get married that get on your nerves, and you didn't even ever think it could get on your nerves, but it does because you're living in proximity to another person. Massive shift. All right, I remember trying to learn how to communicate with my wife when we first got married. I'm still learning how to communicate with my wife, but especially when I first got married, because this is a different form of communication, totally different. You don't communicate to your wife the same way you communicate to your mother or your sister or your friends. It's totally different. I remember a moment where I had a conversation with my wife, and I thought, what's a good way to say this thing? How could I say this in a way that a good husband would say this? So I said, honey, can we talk? She's like, absolutely. I said, what do you say you and I take a journey together and we look for new and better ways to fold my socks? She politely said, no thanks. But the look on her face let me know that she was looking for new and better ways to stick her foot in my rear end, if you know what I'm saying. Communication in marriage, it is a huge shift that it feels like we're constantly making. It's a shift. Then you have a kid, shift. Everybody tells you, your life's going to change, man. It's going to be different. It's going to be different. It's going to change. It's going to change. Yeah, I know. Then you have the kid, and you're like, man, my life just changed. Shift. 2 kids. Once you get used to figuring out how one works, then you have 2 kids, and now the house is full of shift. All right, there is shift you can't even turn. You can't turn without bumping into some shift in the house. The more kids you add, exponential shift. All through the house, it changes like crazy. Then you get promoted in your job, or you get transferred, or you move to a new city. Shift. All through there, you have shifts. You have, if you have somebody that you lose, or you lose a job, there's a shift. You change careers. You got to learn some things. Some of the things you learned here, you can bring, and some things you have to unlearn. Shift. You have to do it. And then, God forbid, but you maybe lose somebody that's important to you, a friend, a parent, a family member. Somebody dies. There's a shift. It happens. And then we grow up and we have kids, we raise our kids, and they change so quickly. And then retirement, empty nest, huge shifts. It's unbelievable the number of people that don't shift well in empty nest phase. Think about that. 20-some years, you've got a house that's just bustling with kids and energy and activity, and you're taking this kid here and that kid there, and all of a sudden, boom, they're gone. And it's a husband and wife looking at each other like, what do we do now? It's a shift. And some people don't do it well. It's sad to see marriages fall apart in the empty nest phase, but they do. All the time marriages fall apart in the empty nest phase because they don't shift well. Retirement, what do I do now? How do I shift? And life is a huge part of life, a huge part of having a quality life is going to be managing and handling shifts well. We have to. Have you ever seen somebody not handling a shift well? It's painful to watch, isn't it? I saw somebody not handling a shift well not long ago. It was a 40-some-year-old man in skinny jeans. All right? That's someone not shifting well. Now, I'm just going to say this. I'm just going to say it. If you're a 40-year-old man or older, you have no business in skinny jeans. Just don't do it, okay? Just put them down, slowly back away, okay? Please don't do it. In order to wear skinny jeans, you have to be two things, and you can't be either. You got to be both. You got to be young, and you got to be skinny, okay? Not either, both, okay? There's nothing worse. I seriously want to carry around darts for people who shouldn't be wearing skinny jeans and just throw them at their butt. Honestly, I want to do that. You just shouldn't be. It's just a terrible. But you see men, okay, who just can't embrace aging, and they're trying to hang on to something that they have no business hanging on to, okay? There's nothing worse seeing a man who's still trying to channel his inner frat boy when he's supposed to be an adult. But you're going, come on, seriously, man? You're still talking that way? You're still acting that way? You're still doing those things? You're still thinking that way? Come on, man. Let's step it up. Let's not do this. Let's not do the midlife crisis. If you don't have a motorcycle when you hit 50, 50 is not the time to buy it, bro. Just you're not a motorcycle guy. Just embrace it, okay? Move on, and just embrace the shifts in life. Now, ladies, before you smile too big, okay, before you get too happy, there is a whole industry built upon women that don't shift well. It's called plastic surgery, okay? There are men that are driving Lamborghinis right now because women don't shift well, okay? They're called plastic surgeons. And you know, I'm tired of seeing women who are shooting their face full of Botox because they won't shift well. Look, I just want to see a woman just exercise, eat right, take care of your skin. Gravity's going to happen. We all understand it. You don't need to feel bad about that. That's part of life. Just let it do it. But just do your best. Make the most of what you got. But you don't need to be pumping your face full of formaldehyde, okay? You don't need to do that. You don't look better, okay? It's like you only half your face smiles, okay? We don't want that. Now, here's the thing. Some ladies here even, you're like, yeah, you know, those Desperate Housewives of Atlanta, those Beverly Hills, oh, yeah, I can't believe they do that. But you would do the same thing if you had their money. All right, you'd be getting stuff nipped and tucked and augmented and put back and all that kind of stuff. You just can't afford it, okay? Now, here's the thing. You have to shift well. People don't shift well, and because of that, they don't embrace the season that they're in. One of the greatest things you can do is recognize when a season is ending and when a new season is beginning. And instead of fighting to stay in the old season, you just transition. You transition to the new phase, to the new place that God has you. Some parents have a hard time shifting with their kids. They can't take their hands off. I was good in this phase, but now my kid is this. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to parent a teenager. I don't know how to cut the apron strings when my child's an adult. And there's some moms and dads I want to go, you just need to take your hands off. You need to just back away because you've not shifted into this season. They keep clamoring for the old season instead of shifting into the new season. Throughout this series, we're going to look at a guy who was willing to shift. He was willing to go through some serious shift. And because of that, he was a guy that was taken from a place where he was just simply a fisherman. He was honestly got kind of in a comfort zone to where God took him to become one of the most influential men in history. To do things beyond what he could have done in his own ability. But in order to go from here to here, he had to make several shifts. Some of them were huge mentally, and we're going to talk about one today. So go ahead and turn with me in your Bibles to the book of Luke, chapter 5. This man's name is Peter. Throughout Scripture, he's referred to sometimes as Peter, sometimes he's referred to as Simon or Simon Peter. I'm going to share a story in a few weeks of a conversation that Jesus has with him, and it's where his name is changed from Simon to Peter, which means something else, and there's significance to it. We're not going to hit it today, but we'll get to it. But you'll see Simon, you'll see Peter, Simon Peter, or Cephas in some different translations of the Bible, but it's all talking about the same person, okay? Here we go. This is Jesus and Peter meeting for the first time. It's in Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 1. One day, as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the words of God. He noticed 2 empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon Peter, its owner, to push it out into the water, so he sat in the boat and taught the crowds from there. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon Peter, "Now go out where it is deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish." "Master," Simon Peter replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again." This time, the nets were so full of fish that they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat. And soon, both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm too much of a sinner to be around you." For he was awestruck by the number of fish that they had caught, as were the others with him. His partners, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. Jesus replied to Peter, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people." And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. Jesus saw something in Peter that Peter did not see in himself. He saw something in Peter that Peter did not see in himself. Of all the crowds that Jesus hung around, of all the places he went, of all the people he met, he chose Peter. And when you really dig into this story and you look at the significance of what happens here, it's really an astonishing, incredible story. Jesus is teaching. His teaching is profound. He's got a huge crowd. He needs to use this boat out of necessity, so Peter lets him use his boat. He goes out, he begins teaching, and after he goes up to Peter and he tests him. He gives him a test. "Peter, I want you to go out and to put your net down again." Now, have you ever had something you were really good at and you knew what you were doing, and somebody who really was frankly incompetent, not as good as you at that thing, starts coaching you up on what you're supposed to do? You ever been there, right? And you don't want to be a jerk. You want to be respectful. You want to be nice, and you just want to say, "Yeah, I'll tell you what. You do what you do. I'll do what I do, and we'll be fine." Jesus had no experience fishing. He was a carpenter, and he was a speaker, right? So in Peter's mind, he's got to be thinking, why don't you go speak? Speakers speak, carpenters carpent, okay? And I'm a fisherman. Why don't you let me handle the fishing? Why don't you let me take care of this? And yet Jesus had Peter in a place where he was testing him. In fact, when you look at this, go ahead and go to that verse 5. Even the language here, the conversation that they have is really interesting. Peter's talking to him. He's trying to be respectful. He says, "Look, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, we'll try it again. If you say so, we'll give it another shot." I've been at this place before. I've been here. And what happens here is, in a step of obedience, Peter does what Jesus tells him to do, and his eyes become open to what happens when you live your life in being obedient to the power of God. If you live your life being obedient to the power of God, there will be some blessings and some rewards. You will reap some things that make absolutely no sense. They don't make sense. Peter's going, "What? I spent all night working. I did this whole thing." He drops the net down, and all of a sudden, the nets are full. And the whole boat turns into chaos, okay? Next verse. "If you say so, we'll let them down again. And this time the nets were so full of fish that they began to tear." Exclamation point. That tells me chaos. Then 7, they started to shout to other partners, hey, guys, we need some help. We need some help. We're overwhelmed. In fact, it says that the boat was on the verge of sinking. Only God can take you from the place of absolute frustration. You've been casting the net, you've been casting the net, you've been casting the net. Have you ever been there? Dropping the net all night, working your tail off, working hard. You got a plan, you're trying, you're an expert, you know what you're doing, but you're not getting the results you need. And all of a sudden, God says, I want you to do it again, and you do it, and here we go. Chaos ensues. Let me tell you, this right here is how I want to live my life. I want to live my life exactly like this. I want many different versions of this story to happen to me and to happen to this church. I want God to bless this church and begin to pour out a move, like something that's a movement. It's not stale. It's not just a bunch of people coming to listen to a guy or a bunch of people just coming to sing or just they got a few gadgets or some cool. I'm talking about the power of God blessing something and his power filling our nets. You know what my prayer is for our church? I pray that we are in a state of chaos. That's what I'm praying. I'm praying that the power of God would hit you and you and you and you and me so hard that this place is chaos, that our nets are ripping, our boat feels like it's sinking, that we got to, hey, somebody come on, hey, Randy, we got to knock this wall out, man. We got no room. We got to buy some more chairs. What's wrong? We got to pave the lot more. We got to park people on the grass. We got to fill up the street. Where are we going to go? We can't handle it. Our nets are completely full. Now listen, if you're here and you're in a season of life where it feels a little bit out of your grasp, a little bit out of your control, a little bit beyond what you feel capable of handling, you're in a fantastic place. Because there's a myth in the Christian world, and I don't know who said it, but people just think it, that somehow if your life is perfectly in control and every duck is in a row and everything is neatly packed together, that somehow you're being blessed by God. Let me tell you, when you're a little bit frantic, you're a little bit out of control, you're a little bit past your ability to fully reason your situation, you're probably dead smack in the middle of God's will. That's where I want to be. Now, many people, they won't put themselves in that position. Why? Because to be in that position takes them out of control. All right, so here, just lock this in, write this down. The number one principle of shifting, shift number one is give up control. The biggest myth in the universe is control. It's an absolute myth. You are not in control of anything. Neither am I. There's no control. I know that's bad news. Some of you are like, I'm out. Okay, if this is what this series is about, you're telling me I'm not in control, I'm out. Well, I'm just telling you, you are not in control of anything. I like to be in control. I like the illusion of being in control. I tell you, I like to be driving in the car. I feel uncomfortable being in a car I'm not driving. To be honest with you, I don't like it. I don't want somebody driving my kids. I want to drive my kids. I want to drive myself. When I go to get in the car, my wife gets in even if she drove to pick me up, she'll go get in the passenger seat. We don't even talk about it. She just does it. She'll get in the passenger seat, and I'll drive. We take a trip. We can drive 20 hours. I'm going to drive the whole thing. I like to drive. I like to be in control. I like to be in control of my finances. You put things down. Okay, I'm going to save this much money. I'm going to invest this much money. I'm going to give this much money. We're going to spend this in this way. We're going to put all. I love that. I like to feel like I'm in control. But guess what? I'm not in control. I'm driving down a highway. Somebody could easily swerve into me. They could hit me. My money could go away like that. I could be sued. The economy could go bad. I could lose investments. Just all kinds of things could happen to my money. My health. I like to think I'm in control of my health. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do all that. I think I'm in control. I'm not in control. I could get a disease. I could I could be crippled. Anything can happen. You can lose control. You are not in control of anything. And the sooner you release control and let go of control, the more you are going to be at peace with the shift that God has you in. It's absolutely unbelievable what Peter did here. Jesus does this miracle, fills up his nets, and then he says, Peter, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. Put down your nets, follow me. And he does. Unbelievable. Because his nets represented security. His nets represented what he was good at. His nets represented finances. It represented stability. Jesus didn't give him a plan. He didn't really explain much. He just said, I want you to put your nets down and come follow me. I'm going to make you a fisher of men. If I'm Peter here, this conversation looks very, very different. Very different. Jesus says, I want you to put down your nets, come follow me, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. I'm like, wow, that's really flattering. And I really appreciate the catch we just got. I know you were in that because I was in the lake all day and we didn't, or all night. We didn't get anything, so I get it. I know you're not just a great teacher. You just did something cool. That's great. But I'm gonna need you. You say, come follow you. I'm gonna need you to unpack that for me a little bit. What do you mean by that? Where am I following you to? Where are we going? Where are we staying? Where are we sleeping? Who else is going? What are we eating? When we get wherever it is I'm following you to, what are we going to be doing? And you said something about fishing for men. I'm assuming you were speaking metaphorically. Can you just kind of explain, let's get concrete here. Can you tell me exactly what that's going to look like, what my role on the team is going to be, and the assurances I have, and I'm going to need you to sign some of those guarantees before. Oh yeah, by the way, what's going to happen to my business that I've worked hard for? There's many indicators in Scripture that Peter was a good businessman. He wasn't just some guy out with a pole pulling in fish by himself. He had nets. He had men working for him. He had a business going. He had a family. Peter had a family. In another chapter, Jesus heals his mother-in-law. So we know he had a family. He had a wife. What does he do? He follows Jesus. Now, we're going to see in the next few weeks, you're going to see Peter at certain points was a mess. Okay, he was a mess. He many times he said things he shouldn't have said. He did things he shouldn't have done. He acted rashly. He acted many times impulsively. Okay, but one thing he did right was he gave up control of his life. And one thing he did right was he had his heart in the right place. He followed Jesus. When Jesus said come, he said absolutely, and he responded, and he gave up control of his life. Listen, don't trade the feeling of being in control for the feeling of being alive. A lot of people value the feeling of being in control, so they live life in second gear when God's called them to be in fifth gear. And the reason is they've accumulated some stuff. They've got some stuff. I'm here in second gear, and I kind of know I'm restless. I kind of know I should be going in fifth gear. I kind of know I should shift. I kind of know I should go to the next level, but I'm kind of holding back because I know that I can manage second gear. They don't like the feeling of ambiguity. They don't like the feeling of uncertainty. But I've got news for you. Jesus doesn't promise you that when you follow him, you give your life to him, that everything's going to be certain. There's a few things you are certain of, but what does the Bible say? The Bible says without faith, it's impossible to please God. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. What is faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You ever hope for something you can't see? How does that make you feel? Uncomfortable. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So the one thing Peter got right out of the gate, the one thing he got right was, I'm going to put down my net, I'm going to follow Jesus, I'm going to relinquish control of my life. There's some of you here, you're in a season in your life and you got things under control, but you're miserable. You're absolutely miserable. You know you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You know that there's more out there. And the funny thing is, you're willing to trade being miserable. You're willing to hang on to being miserable for being certain about what you have. So I'll hold on to this because I'm sure about it and there's some control here. Even though I don't like most of it, I'm going to hold on to it. But the reality is if you let go of it, if you put your net down and say, I'm going to be radically obedient to God, I'm going to step into this new thing, I'm going to shift. I'm going to shift my mindset. I'm going to give up control. I'm going to step into this new season. What will happen is you will come alive. I just met with somebody a couple weeks ago who quit their career and they started a new career. They said, I was absolutely miserable, but I stayed in it far too long. And I got to a place I just couldn't take it anymore. I knew I wasn't living my purpose. I was under challenged. There was nothing really solid in what I was doing. I was just doing something I didn't really fully believe in. And I just said, you know what? I don't care if I fail. I'm going for it. And they quit their job. They said, the moment I quit and started to pursue what God had for me, he goes, this door opened, and this door opened, and this door opened, and then this person referred me to this person, and then this unexpected miracle happened, and then this thing came, and I'm watching this person's eyes just wide open, like living what God has called him to do. And I looked at him and I said, actually, man, I got something to add to that. And I was able to refer them to somebody, a person that they didn't even know, doors that hadn't opened. How did it happen? Well, they said, I'm going to put down my net. I'm going to put down my net. I'm going to relinquish control. I'm going to let go of this thing. I'm going to step out in faith, and I'm going to trust that if it's God that's calling me to do it, if it's Jesus that's saying, put down the net, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. You don't have to fully get it. You don't have to understand it. I don't need you to understand it. I just need you to put down your net and follow me. That if it's truly God that's calling you to do it, then when you take that step, then he's going to provide, and you are going to feel alive. I'm telling you, some of you, when you take that step of faith, you will immediately come back to life. You've been apathetic. You've been holding back, you've been stale, you've been living in fear, and you've been living with a sense, an absolute myth that you're in control, and you're not. You're not, and you're miserable. So shift has to happen. We have to shift. Listen, the people, you know who should be the craziest people in our church? The wildest? The most full of faith, the oldest people in our church. Because they should be the ones who have been taking the most shifts. We ought to have 80-year-olds up here doing the Dougie, right? We ought to have 70-year-olds going, Greg, why is your vision so small? Why are you only wanting to plant 100 churches? Let's plant 1,000. We ought to have 60, 70-year-olds. I don't have to go, hey, you guys need to settle down. Seriously, will you guys just chill? Will you have a seat? Somebody settle these guys down. Why? Because as believers, God didn't call us to peak. He called us to shift. He didn't call us to peak. Now, physically, we peak. Our bodies, we go like this. We hit our peak, and then we start to deteriorate. Our energy levels get low. Our mind goes. Our body goes. We die. Spiritually, we don't hit a peak. If you've ever been in a church full of people who have peaked, it's the worst place to be. The worst. People who have peaked will be toxic to the environment of a growing, thriving church because they've plateaued, they peaked, and they're like, oh, this is all I've got. Once you've peaked, you're not hungry for change. You're not hungry to shift. Why would I shift? I've peaked. I'm right here. The problem is some of you think you've peaked, and you haven't. You're in second gear, you're supposed to be in fifth. You need to shift. You need to go to the next gear. You're still alive. There's still things God wants to accomplish through you. Our bodies go like this. Our spirit should go like this. Should go like this. I want to invite, if you're older, okay, if you're aging and you're shifting, please come be a part of this church. I want to learn from you. I want to hear from you. I want to pull you in around me. I want to be challenged by you. I want you coming to me with crazy ideas. I want you blowing my mind. I just want to get around you because just the proximity that I want to get to is as close as I can get, because you should be the ones who are constantly shifting to the next gear. And when you get to that place, you go, Lord, what's the next one? Oh, I'm going to say, oh, what's the next one? You should be so full of faith because you should have so many stories of the faithfulness of God, of how you've navigated every single shift. Spiritually, that's what that has to be the trajectory that we continue to allow God to challenge us and to push us. So what was so great about Peter? Or what was so great? If Peter was, if he was made so many mistakes and we see so many things, he had some character flaws, he had some things that weren't good. What was it about Peter that caused him to be able to make these shifts? And let me show you. Luke 5, 10, and 11. Actually, you know what? Go ahead and go back. Go Luke 5:5-9. Yeah, right there, perfect. He says this. It says, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "O Lord, please leave me. I'm too much of a sinner to be around you." For he was awestruck by the number of fish that they had caught. Of all the things Peter did wrong, the thing he did right is he was humble. He was humble before the Lord. And he's like, "Lord, I just want to be awestruck by you. I'm not worthy of you. Leave me. I don't even deserve this calling. You asked me to put down my nets and follow you instead of going, well, what about my nets? What about these nets I've worked so hard? I bought those nets. I worked hard for those nets. I built this business. You want me to give this up?" It was like, I don't deserve to follow you. I don't deserve this. It was an attitude. Some people think you did God a favor by getting up and coming to church today. That God would be lucky to get your money. That God would be lucky to get your time. Totally wrong attitude. I want to surround myself with people who are awestruck at the goodness of God. Awestruck. Oh, wow. Can you believe that? Can you believe what God's doing? Can you believe that the God of the universe would actually meddle in my business? Can you believe that the God of the universe actually spoke to me and guided my heart? This right here is the key to unlock the shifts in your life. This right here is the key that will make sure that your life is an adventure, that your boats will be full, that your nets will be breaking, that you will constantly have things out of your grasp, but God will continue to pull you in, that say, "Come follow me, I'll make you a fisher of men. I will blow your mind." Peter couldn't see where Jesus was taking him. He's just obedient at the call. But what was it? It was this attitude. I don't deserve it. I'm not good enough, but Lord, I will trust you. And he was willing to do it. You don't have to be good enough. You don't have to be smart enough. You don't have to have control of your life. You don't have to have it all figured out. What you have to do is you've got to be humble in the presence of God and say, "Lord, not my will. It's not about me. I know I'm over my head. I know I can't do it. But Lord, I know your power and I see that you're alive and I know what you're doing. And if I have any regret at the end of my life, it's going to be not obeying you." Peter figured this somehow knew in that moment, if I don't put this net down and I don't go follow the voice of God, I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life, not losing my business. So that's my prayer. That's my prayer for you. That's my prayer for this church. Look, I promise you this, as long as I'm pastoring this church, I'm going to give my very best. I'm going to do my very best to stay humble before the Lord, to stay vulnerable in his presence, to open myself up, to go, "Lord, I'm not trying to do this for you. I want to do this with you, Lord. I need you in the boat. I need you in the boat. I need you speaking. Where do we cast the net? When do we cast it? When do we throw it down?" And let me tell you, there will be some people, I guarantee you this, shift happens in churches all the time. Shift will happen in this church. There will be some people, when we cast a net at a certain time, will be like, "That's stupid. Why are you casting that net in that way? We've already tried that. It doesn't work. I've seen it. It doesn't work. Why are you trying? I don't like what you're doing. I don't like what. We just cleaned the nets." If I'm one of Peter's co-workers, I'm like, "Dude, why are you throwing that net down? I just cleaned that net." There's going to be people that are not going to like it. I'm not here to be a people pleaser. I'm here to be a God pleaser. And if God tells us to throw down nets, as long as I'm pastor here, we're going to throw down nets. We're going to do it where he says it, when he says it. We're going to do our best to be in tune. And this is what's going to happen. There will be some people that won't make the shift, that'll go, "Look, I don't want to throw a net there. I don't want to do that thing." And they're going to go away, and they're going to read about and hear second and third hand about the nets that are breaking in this place, because God is going to do it. It's going to be him. It's going to be about him. It's not going to be about me. It's not going to be about you. It's going to be about him. And simply our job is to do what he says, to put down the net, to drop the net when he says, where he says, how he says, and he alone will fill that net, and it's going to be a great ride. Along the way, you and I are going to have to make some shifts. Mentally, behaviorally, spiritually, we're going to have to, we cannot peak. We cannot peak. As long as we have breath in our lungs, we cannot peak. We can't say we got this thing figured out. We know what we're doing. We got to be willing to say, "I am willing to shift and do what God's called me to do, when he's called me to do it, how he's called me to do it." Here's where we're going. In the next few weeks, We're going to talk about when is the right time to shift. We're going to talk about how to shift. We're going to talk about when is the wrong time to shift. And next week, this is what we're going to, the question next week is going to be this: are you in the right gear? So we're going to talk about. That's going to be good next week. Are you in the right gear? And I'm going to ask you a question, not this question, but a different question. And the answer to that question will make absolutely 100% crystal clear whether you are in the right church or not.